T-minus 20 seconds and counting. We are go. Guidance internal.
Roll program confirmed.
10, 9, 8, 7. Ignition sequence start. 4, 3, 2, 1. All engines running.
Hi, I'm Floyd Jaehnert. We're going to talk about the planetary transmission used in the NRS series of Ford cars. Planetary transmissions are operated by bands, activated by hand levers and foot pedals. This transmission has 2 speeds forward and 1 reverse. This hand lever is used to activate low or high gear. When this lever is pulled backwards towards the rear of the car, it locks the transmission into low gear. When it's pushed forward, it locks the transmission into high gear. When the lever is vertical, the transmission is in neutral. There are also three foot pedals. The left foot pedal is the brake, the middle foot pedal is reverse, the right foot pedal is the parking brake. The open air construction is more than adequate for today's use and conditions, but not for conditions that existed when they were new. The moving parts of the transmission were completely open and subject to an extremely dusty environment. The transmission frame was subject to extreme twisting and torque from bad roads or no roads. Subsequently, they have usually been broken and weld repaired in several places. The frame should be carefully checked and repaired if required. The socket for the wishbone will very often be broken, as well as the thinner wall sections. The frames are saturated with oil and need to be degreased before welding. They are almost impossible to weld if not cleaned prior to welding. Vapor degreasing is the best method, but soaking in lacquer thinner is an alternative. However, use caution for fire and ventilation with lacquer thinner. The babbitt bearing in the back end of the frame should also be checked and replaced if worn. The transmission drums have their own particular problems, including wear on the outside diameters, from the bands and road grit, and from fatigue cracking. There are 3 different drums in the assembly: a reverse plate, a gear case, and a brake drum. The brake plate usually has the most wear on the outside diameter because it is used the most. Check the gear for loose rivets and also the center bushing for wear. Note that this brake plate has been repaired by brazing the outside diameter, which caused a binding and grabbing when the brakes were applied. The reverse plate is rather thin and generally will have fatigue cracks. Check for loose rivets on the gear and also wear on the center bushing. The gear case drum or the planet drum tend to crack in the areas of the triple gear pins. There are 6 different gears in the transmission. 1 is riveted to the brake plate, 1 riveted to the reverse plate. 1 slips onto the main transmission shaft and is keyed with a Woodruff key. There are 3 inside the gear case drum or the planet drum. Check the gears for wear and also make sure they are riveted tight to the drums. Check triple gears for bushing and shaft wear. The original triple gears were 3 separate pieces and then assembled into 1 unit. The center gear was made of bronze and wore rather severely. The new gears are 1 piece, 4140 steel, and are hardened for better wearability. There have been several different tooth configurations made over the years. When replacing any of the gears, use caution they are all the same tooth angle, as they will not intermix. Examine the square female on the transmission shaft and the square male on the end of the crankshaft for rotational play or slop. Check threads on the shaft and the transmission spider. This adjusts the tension on the high speed cone for locking into high gear. Also check the fingers on the transmission spider for wear or galling. You should also check the high speed cone for wear or galling. Clean all parts and deburr where needed. If replacing riveted gears, use a bucking mandrel to support the drums when riveting. Install planet gears in gear case drum, noting which end of the gear meshes with the corresponding gear on the brake or reverse drum. Put main transmission shaft on a square shaft standing vertically in a vise. Thread on the transmission spider assembly and drop on the high-speed friction plate. The driving pinion will now slip on the shaft and be held from rotating with a Woodruff key. Next, install a large fiber washer, then the reverse plate and gear, another large fiber washer, and then the gear case drum. The gear case drum will only fit onto the reverse plate gear one way, and the triple gear timing marks must be pointed to the theoretical center of the gear case drum. Next is another large fiber washer and then the brake plate and gear. There are 3 smaller fiber washers and steel thrust washers that fit into the brake plate before the transmission thrust plate lock nut is tightened. When the assembly is complete, turn the spider unit at the bottom of the assembly until it just makes contact with the high-speed friction plate. Then tighten the lock nut until moderate pressure is required to turn the drums. If the drums will not turn, loosen the nut slightly and try again. If it still will not turn, the triple gears are probably out of time. Disassemble the unit and retime the gears. If the unit will turn with moderate pressure, drill through the lock nut hole into the end of the transmission shaft. The nut is then secured with a 1/8 inch brass dowel pin driven into the nut and drilled hole. Finally, attach the driving plate with 6 hex screws. You are now ready to install the planet unit into the transmission frame and the vehicle. Original band lining material was 4 separate phenolic pieces for each band. These were riveted onto the bands, and in doing so tended to distort the roundness of the bands. I had a local brake shop glue in 1-piece molded brake lining material. They clamped the band and the lining around a steel mandrel, keeping the band unit round. A few rivets may be added for safety. The band units are adjusted to the planet unit by bending the supporting arms until the lining is basically free of the drum. The bands are then tightened to grab the drum securely, yet releasing fully when relaxed. This takes a lot of time and patience. High gear is adjusted by turning the spider unit until the spider locks up on the high-speed cone with moderate pressure on the transmission controller lever. The spider should snap onto the high-speed cone securely. Each transmission will adjust differently according to how much wear is in the levers, shafts, and linkages. Despite its reputation, the design of this transmission was basically sound. This was proven by its use in the next generation of planetary transmission in the Model T Ford for more than 20 years. I hope this information will help you operate and restore the NRS transmission.